Today's daf in the Sechet Zevachim, so I'm trying to pull it up on my computer, is, there we go. Today's daf in the Sechet Zevachim is daf Mem Chet, 48. And we just started yesterday a new parak called Parak Ezum Mikomam Shel Zevachim, which obviously is very familiar to many people because we read it every morning at davening or before davening. But the Mishnah talks about where do we shecht karbanot. The Mishnah said all kachei kachim are done b'tzafon, and then we said specific examples. And the first specific example in the Mishnah were the par and the sa'ir and Yom Kippur, which are very special karbanot because they are brought inside the Kodesh HaKodeshim, and they have to be shechted in the north. Now, says the Gemara today, we are at the top line of Daf Mem Chet Amud Aleph, Michti. Where does the Torah say that when you shecht an animal, you do it in tzafon? Remember that the tzafon is written by the carbon ola. That's the source. Where it says by ola, remember there are a couple of parshiot about an ola. The first parsha of an ola is when you bring a ben bakar, you bring a cow for an ola. It doesn't actually say north in that parsha. The second parsha of ola, which is the second parsha in Vayikra, is when it refers to a olat son, when you bring a sheep for an ola. And there it says, you shechted al yerech hamizbeach tzafona. Okay? So it says the Gemara, why would you first list in the Mishnah, par and sa'ir of Yom Kippur, michti tzafon ba'ola ktiv? So the source of tzafon is by the carbon ola. So if the source of tzafon is by the carbon ola, why don't you say the carbon ola is the first example? The answer is the Gemara, well, because it's nitni ola bereisha. Answers the Gemara, well, you're right, but a chatat is learned from a drasha, from ola. And Aidi Da'ati Midrasha Chavivala. It's a very common principle we have, which is that the Tanaim loved things that were learned from a drasha. That's what they did. So it's not actually the original source that they like to quote. It's the drasha that they like to quote. Okay, but even if it's a chatat, the drasha of a chatat, we're going to go through this all in a minute, is that we learn a chatat chitzonot, right? Meaning a regular chatat, a chatat that's done outside the Kodesh Kodeshim, the chatat that you do every day or something. That's where we compare the ola, the makom you shech the chatas, the makom the ola. So why don't you mention a chatat chitzonot, like a regular chatat? Why do you have a specific chatat of Yom Kippur? Answers the Gemara, well, these are very special chatot. Since the blood of this carbon chatat is brought inside the Beit HaMikdash, inside the Kodesh HaKodeshim, chaviv alei, it's a very special chatat. It's one we like to mention, and so it's true that all carbon chataot are shechted in the north, but we mention this one first. We're going to, of course, mention all of them, but we mention this one first. Ask the Gemara, okay, so now I understand. That's the structure of our Mishnah. Tell me, though, says the Gemara, how, let me just make sure I'm still with you all. Yeah, tell me, how do you know this? Right? So let's figure it all out. Tzafona ba'ola hechaktiva. Where does it say tzafon by an ola? Now, it's not, obviously we know this, rhetorical. We quote the pasuk, v'shachat oto yerach hamizbeach tzafona. Shech the carbon ola on the side of the mizbeach on the north, right? Now, it says more, okay, we know that pasuk, but that pasuk is written, ashkechan ben zon. That's written by an ola that's brought from sheep. How do you know an ola that's brought from bakar also? Ben bakar minalan, right? An ola can be brought either from larger animals or from smaller animals. How do you know that a large ola, meaning a cow, has to be brought shechted on the tzafon as well? Because Amar Kra, if you look at the parshiot I'm sorry, I don't have it all in front of me, so I can't quote them all. But if you look in the first parak of Vayikra, the first parsha is in Ben Bakar, you bring your ola, and then the words continue, V'im min hatzon karbano. Right? Pasuk Yud. If you bring your carbon from the tzon, the vav mosif al inyan rishon. The vav adds, and do it by the tzon. Now, usually when you have an addition, you would say, by the first parsha you do X, Y, and Z, and then you say and the next parsha, you would say that the things that you did by the first group, you do at the second group. Here we go backwards. Yomod elyon mitachton. We learn the things that are said by the second group, by the tachton, meaning the lower one in the Torah, because the Torah is written in columns, right? The ones that lower in the Torah, the second parsha of the tzon, teaches about the first one. So by Ben Bakar, it didn't say it, but then it did have a vav, and the vav connects them. And the connection is not just unidirectional, maybe, that you go to number 2 from number 1, but it's backwards. You learn the elyon from the tachton. Okay, that's a very nice drasha from the extra vav. But that's not exactly agreed by everybody. If you agree that you can learn above from below, meaning when you have a vav, instead of going forward with that vav, you go backwards, that makes sense, that you learn the shechita in the north from the second parsha teaches on the first parsha. But if you disagree with that strategy, you hold that you can't learn the second parsha to the first parsha, what's the source? Now, where do we see this machlok? To Tanya. There's a braita that says the following, very interesting braita, which talks about a karban asham. Okay, so it says v'im nefesh. This is at the end of Vayikra, and it talks about bringing a karban asham, right, for me'ilah. Okay, now very interestingly, remember if a person does a sin on purpose, well not on purpose, so the person does a sin, that's a chiyuv karet, and he's a mistaken, not on purpose, he's a mistake. He brings a karban chatat, right? Chatat is only brought, we think, for a chiyuv karet. Let's say Shabbos, for example. If a person is safek, he doesn't know if he did a sin, then he brings what's called an asham taloi, right? An asham that's maybe. He doesn't know if he did the sin. If he for sure did the sin, he would bring a karban chatat. Because he's not sure, he brings an asham. And remember, we learned about this in Shavuot. If he then realizes that he actually did the thing, he has to go back and bring a chatat. If he never realized, he gets a kapar from the asham. But that's true about a sin that you would have otherwise brought a karban chatat. There's another category of asham called asham me'ilot. Right? If a person takes something from hektish and uses it without hektish's permission, right, without the right thing, he has to bring an asham. What if now that's not a chiyuv karet, right? For doing me'ilah, you're chayav alav, but you're not chayav karet. Let's say a person had a safek me'ilah. He wasn't sure if he did me'ilah or not, right? So the question is, do you bring an asham taloi, a safek asham, for that sin? Since it's not something you bring a karban chatat for, but it is something you bring a karban asham for. So that's the background. Says the Brighton now, the pasuk v'im nefesh, which basically is an extra vav, we add on the case of asham me'ilot, is telling you that l'chayav safek me'ilot asham taloi. It's telling you the top parsha was asham taloi, the next parsha is asham me'ilot, and the Torah uses the vav, we think, is what Rabbi Akiva is saying, to tell you that just like you bring asham taloi when you're not sure about it, isur karet, you also bring an asham taloi by a safek me'ilah. That's divrei Rabbi Akiva. The Chachamim potrim. The Chachamim say that you don't bring an asham taloi, uncertain asham for me'ilah. And we think that this is the argument. Ma'alav b'akim miflagi. Machlokes Rabbi Akiva and Rabbanan is based on whether you darshan the vav forwards or backwards, basically. I mean, Mar Savar L'Meidin, Rabbi Akiva holds that because the vav tells you that, and by asham me'ilah, it's telling you that you go backwards, basically, and learn asham taloi, I said backwards, up to asham me'ilah, Umar Savar in L'Meidin. Says Rav Papa, no. I completely disagree with you. The Kuli Amal L'Meidin. Everybody agrees that when there's a vav, the vav can go in both directions, meaning you can learn the vav, meaning that whatever happened in the top parsha also happens in the second parsha, or the backwards, saying that whatever we learned in the second parsha goes up to the top parsha. Why is there a machlokes about whether you bring an asham taloi for an isser of me'ilah? The reason the Rabbanan say you don't bring an asham taloi is because a different reason. Because it's exer shafa, basically, or it's you based on a word in the pasuk. Nemar kan mitzvot, because it says by a karban chatat, if you do one of the mitzvot Hashem Elokecha shelo te'asenna, it says the word mitzvot by an asham taloi, and nemar bechatat chelev mitzvot, and it says by chelev, by a karban chatat, the word mitzvot. Ma'alalan, just like a karban chatat, everybody agrees. It's only davar shechayavin al zdono karet l'shigato chatat, right? Something that if you did it on purpose, you'd be chayav karet, like Shabbos. If you do it by mistake, you bring a chatat. Afkan, so too here by a karban asham taloi, the word itself of mitzvot tells you it's only certain mitzvot, meaning things that are chayavin al zdono karet l'shigato chatat. Okay, so that the only chiyuv of an asham taloi is by if you have a mistake in a mitzvah. And what does mitzvah mean? Mitzvah means something that if you did it on purpose, you'd be chayav karet. Rabbi Akiva says, no, I don't agree with that liman, because the point is, l'mala alam bekavua. The reason we're comparing the asham taloi to the chatat is not to say that just like a chatat, you only bring for a sin that is a karet, so to an Asham Talo you bring for a sin that's a karet. It's telling you that just like a chatat is only brought bikavua, meaning there's always a fixed sin, there's a fixed punishment for doing a sin that's a chatat. If you're mechal Shabbat by mistake, you bring a korban chatat. So too by the Asham, it has to be bikavua, meaning, what are we excluding? La'afuki chatat tumat mikdash ukdoshav. Telling you that you don't bring an Asham Taloi if the sin that you did, or the sin that you think you did, or might have done, is the sin of going into the Mikdash when you're Tameh. Because if you recall that by the sin of Tumat Mikdash Ukdoshav, where you either eat Kachin Tameh, or you go in when you're Tameh, you bring a Karban Olev Yoretu. You bring an Olev Yoret, right? And so in that, what the Torah is telling you is that a Karban Chatat is not brought for sin of going into Beit HaMikdash. You only bring a Karban Kavua for a Chatat. So too, by an Asham Taloi, it's not brought, and Asham is not done if you're suffix whether you went into the Beit HaMikdash Tameh. But, so you compare them for that reason. But you don't compare them for the fact that a Chatat is brought only on something that's Karet, and Asham Taloi can be brought for something that's Me'ilah, that's not an Isser Karet. Answers Rabbanan, but then you're basically doing Gzer Shava in half. Rabbanan saying Gzer Shava L'Mechza, right? If you're comparing an Asham Taloi to a Chatas, then it should be compared for everything. Every chatat requirement should apply to Hasham Taloi. How can you tell me it's comparing it for one aspect, but not for another aspect? Says Gemara, it's a good question. Rabbi Akiva Nami Engzer Shaval Mechza. Says Gemara, you're right. Rabbi Akiva will take a step back. Einachinami. It's true. Rabbi Akiva agrees that if you do make a Gzer Shava of Hasham Taloi to chatat, then you would exclude an Hasham Me'ilot from Hasham Safek, right? Because since Me'ilah can't be Chayav Chatat because it doesn't have kares, so you can't bring a Safek Hasham for that. But the reason Rabbi Akiva says you do it is because he says there's something more powerful than the Gzeira Shava. The machloket here is Rabbi Akiva Savar that the vi in Nefesh, right, the extra vav that compares Hasham Me'ilot to Hasham Taloi, telling you Ktiv, vav Mosif al Inyan Rishon. The Vav tells you, it's true, you have a Gzeira Shava that says that really an Asham Taloi should be just like a Karban Chatat. And a Karban Chatat is only brought for an Isser Karet that you know for sure that you've done it wrong, and you know that there's a fixed punishment for doing it, meaning it's not Olev Yoret, it's not dependent on how rich you are. It's true, but there's an extra Vav, and the extra Vav comes to tell me that there's an exception to the Gzeira Shava, basically. And the exception is that Hasham Me'ilot, if you make a mistake in Me'ilah, and it's a suffix, you can bring an Hasham Taloi. Okay, I mean, you're going back and forth, but all the proofs Rabbi Akiva has, how do the Rabbanan sort of get around that? I mean, what about the fact that the pasuk says that there's a Vav that compares these two things together, right? Just trying to find my place here. The Rabbanan say right, sorry, here we go. For Rabbanan, it says V'im Nefesh. Answer the Rabbanan, you know what we think, says the Gemara list. Maybe this is the machloken, in fact, that there's a Gzeira Shava that says compare the Asham to the Chatat, which would imply that since Me'ilah is not a Chi of Karet and therefore not a Chi of Chatat, it shouldn't be Chayav an Asham. There's a Vav, that's a Gzeira Shava. There's a Vav, which is what we call a Hekesh, that says anything that we did before, we do now, meaning that there's a Isser that just like an Asham is brought from Me'ilah, a Safek Asham is Asham Vadai, Asham Taloi, sorry. So maybe the machloket is whether the hekesh is more important, which compares them, or the Gzeira Shava, which doesn't compare them. So maybe Marsav hekesh adif and Marsav Gzeira Shava adif. Maybe that's the machloket. Says more low. That's not the case either. The Kuli Alma hekesh adif. Everybody agrees that a hekesh is more powerful. It's a fascinating use of these klalim. A hekesh is more powerful than a Gzeira Shava. But the Rabbanan would say to you, it's true that you have a Vav that says, just like something happened before, it should happen now, right? So we said that this Vav is telling you that since the first Parsha basically said, you bring a Karban, Asham Taloi, the second Parsha, which is talking about, the opposite. The first Parsha said you bring a Karban, Asham Me'ilot. The second Parsha says that you bring an Asham Taloi, and the Asham Taloi also applies to the Asham Me'ilot. Say the Rabbanan, there's a Vav, but the Vav tells me something very different. The Vav tells me, Amricha Rabbanan, Tachton hu degamar me'elyon. The Vav is actually telling me that you learn something about the lowercase from the uppercase. And what do you learn from the lowercase from the uppercase? La Asham b'kesef shkalim. telling you that just like by Asham Mi'ilot, the Torah says that you have to have, remember, this is a very interesting thing about Asham. A Karban Chatat or an Ola or any other Karban, it just says bring an animal. If you get a really cheap animal, that's kosher for a Karban. But an Asham, the Torah specifically says has to be worth Kesef Shkalim, has to be worth 2 Shkalim, which seems like a very small amount to us, but I guess to them was a bigger amount of money. And therefore, there's a minimum cost for an Asham. You cannot bring an animal that's cheaper than that. So you might have thought that's only true by an Asham Vadai, right? By an Asham, that's brought for Mi'ila or for like, Shifcha Charuf or things like that. But how about an Asham that's a Safek, right? An Asham Talui. You might say there, it doesn't make any sense to say there's a minimum cost for that Asham. Because if you had to bring a Karban Chatat for doing a sin for sure, you wouldn't have a minimum cost. So now you're bringing a Karban Asham because you did a maybe sin that you have to spend more money than if you had done it for sure. Says Gemara, the Vav tells you that yes, in fact, that's true. So let's read it inside. You need the Vav, the Asham, Bekesef Shkalim, to tell you that an Asham is brought for a minimum of 2 Shkalim. Shelo Tamar, you shouldn't say what you would have thought to say, which is, why would you have to bring a minimum price for an Asham? Lo Yehei Sfeiko Chamor Mivado, right? Why would the suffix for doing a sin require you to bring a Karban that's cost more money than a Vadai sin? Because Ma Vadai Chatat, Danka. If you for sure did a sin, and you have to bring a Karban Chatat, you can pay even a Danka. Danka is like a sixth of a dinar, meaning a very small amount if you find an animal that's that cheap. You might have thought, Av Sveko Asham Bar Danka. If you have a suffix, you should also be able to buy a cheap animal. Therefore, the Vav is there to tell you that just like by Asham Mi'ilot you have a minimum price, by Asham Talu you also have a minimum price. So the Vav cannot teach you that just like by, this is Rabbi Akiva's argument, right? Again, this has nothing to do with our Mishnah, just to go back. Rabbi Akiva wanted to say that you bring an Asham Talui even on a sin of Mi'ila because those things are connected. Seder Rabbanan, they're connected to tell you a totally different halacha, which is that although that a Mi'ila has a minimum price and Asham Talui also has a minimum price. Again, so this is nothing to do with our Mishnah, which has to do with shechting in the north, but we're going to have to just finish this argument between Rabbi Akiva and the Rabbanan. So ask the Gemara, Rabbi Akiva, Hasvar min alei. Does Rabbi Akiva know that there's a minimum price for a Karban Asham Talui if he doesn't use this Vav to tell you that? Now, he learns it from the fact that there's a pasuk at the end of Karban Ashamot that says, Zot Torah Asham. This is the rule for all the Ashamot, Torah Achat L'chol Ashamot. There's a universal rule. Every Asham has to have a minimum price. That's okay, but that also is a machloket. Because Teinach, again, these are not relevant to our Mishnah, but obviously very relevant to our knowledge of Zevachim. Teinach man, it's like Torah. There's a machloket about this. There's one opinion that says that the word Torah includes together all the halachot of Asham. But man, let's like Torah meheche gomer. According to the Tana, who doesn't hold that you use Torah to include that, how do you know? Well, there's another source. Gomer be'erkecha, be'erkecha. It says that you have to bring a Asham in its value. And every time it says value, we learn the value is the value of the other Asham. Since the other Asham, it says shtei shkalim, every Asham needs to be shtei shkalim. Says, well, okay, that's a great explanation where it says be'erkecha. But there's one Asham where it doesn't say the word be'erkecha. Asham shivcha charufa. Remember, an Asham that a person brings because they slept with a woman who's a slave, the whole story, it doesn't say the word be'erkecha by that Asham. So according to that Tana, how would you know that you have to pay at least 2 shkalim for that Asham? Gamar ba'ayil ba'ayil. Okay, there's another Gzer Shava. Ba'ayil says ba'ayil by one Asham, ba'ayil by this Asham. Therefore, we learn it out. So that's the end, just to be clear, of that sugya. But just to go back, because we got very, very off topic, the halacha of the Mishnah basically said was, it says that you bring a chatat of tzon, you have to shecht it in the north. The previous parsha in the Torah was a chatat of bakar, and connecting those parshot was a vav. And everybody agrees that the vav connects them, and you can go downwards or upwards, meaning you can learn something from the second parsha to the first parsha. And in this case, we're learning in the second parsha, it says you do it in the north, to the first parsha that the ola of bakar is also done in the north. So now we have a source for the olat bakar and for the olat tzon. Okay? Ask the Gemara, of course, the next question, what about a karban chatat? How do you know a karban chatat? We are 7 lines from the bottom at the 2 dots. How do we know that the karban chatat also has to be done in the north? Chatat b'nal b'bayit safon. That's because the pasuk says very clearly, "V'shachat et hachatat b'makom ha'olah." You shech the karban chatat b'makom ha'olah. So okay, that seems like a great proof, but that's talking about shechita. Ashkan shechita. If you recall, our Mishnah said Kabbalah also needs to be done. You need to accept the blood in the north also, minalan. Meaning, how do you know you can't be standing somewhere else and reach out and collect it? Because it says, "V'lakach hakohen midam hachatat." It says that the Kohen takes the dam hachatat right after that earlier pasuk, not right after, but close to it, implying you have to be in the same place. As the Gemara, well, that implies the blood has to be accepted in the north. But how do you know mikabel atzmo minalan? How do you know the person has to be standing in the north? Not just that the cup is in the north, but he has to physically be standing in the north. Amar kra v'lakach, which is a extra pasuk, and we darshan it lo yikach. He who takes it has to be there, meaning not just you take it, the person who takes it has to be standing in the north. So now we know that by a karban chatat, you have to shecht in the north, like an olah, and you have to be standing in the north. Ashkana mitzvah, okay, that shows you that you're supposed to do it that way. Remember that by kachim, you always have to repeat things. How do you know that if you don't do it, it's puzzle? There's another pasuk that tells you that, because the pasuk says, "Meshachat oto b'makom asher yishchat et ha'olah," that you should shecht it where you shecht the olah, which is repetitive. V'tanya, and says the Braita, "Heichan olah nishchatet." Where does you shecht an olah? B'tzafon. So afzu b'tzafon. So therefore, the chatat has to be shechted b'tzafon. That's the Gemara on the top now of Daf Mem Chet Amud Bet, top word. Is that really the source? Alo kfar nemnar, it already says, b'makom asher tishachet ha'olah tishachet et hachatat. Hachatat, not et hachatat. Where you shech the olah, you shech the chatat, meaning it's repetitive. It said that already. Halama yatsa, right? So why does it say it again, basically? To tell you, the kavua lo makom, to tell you that the place is kavua, meaning shim lo shachata b'tzafon pasul. It's not just that you're supposed to do it there, you have to do it there. And so that is how we know li'ikuva, that you have to shech the karban chatat b'tzafon. We're continuing the practice still. Ata omer l'kach yatsa. Now you say that that's why it repeats shech the chatat in this place where you shech the olah. O enu ela, maybe what the Torah is telling you is that zeh ta'un safon, that this chatat that we're talking about in the parsha needs safon. Right? It says shachat oto. Maybe it's telling you it needs safon. Ve'ein acher ta'un safon. Maybe the whole point of the pasuk is that only this karban chatat needs to be done in the north. Amalomer, therefore, you have the pasuk that says, if you read it this way, shachat et hachatat b'makom ha'olah, right? You shech the chatat b'makom ha'olah, zeh bana'av l'chol chataot. The limit here is that this is a general principle for every karban chatat, shiyu tu not safon, that every chatat needs safon. It's not just one particular chatat. Okay? Okay, so we're very happy now with this Braita. Ashkechan Sa'ir Nasi. We see now the pasuk that we just quoted was written by the Sa'ir of the Nasi, and the Sa'ir of the Nasi members is a very special karban chatat that the Nasi brings if he does a sin that's forgets. Remember we learned all about Hariot. There it says shech b'chatat v'mkom asher yishchat et ha'olah. So, and we learned a double pasuk bein lamitzvah bein la'akev. So the Sa'ir of the Nasi has to be shechted in the north. Shar chataot nami. We also use this last pasuk of what's called a binyan av to say this applies to every karban chatat. Okay, but that's only one time. Ashkechan mitzvah la'akev minolan. How do we know that by every karban chatat it's not only you're supposed to shecht in the north, but that it's ma'akev? Well, the answer is tichtiv b'kispa, tichtiv b'seira. It says both by a chatat of a kesev, right, kispa, sorry, it's a female, and a chatat of a seira, you should shecht it, b'makom asher yishchat et ha'olah. And so it repeats it by the two different karbanot chatat to tell you that every chatat is ma'akev to do it in the north. Ella, so if that's true, right, that the Torah is telling you that every karban chatat has to be done in the north. Right? Remember earlier we asked, it said v'shachat oto b'tzafon, right, b'makom asher yishchat ha'olah. You shecht it where you shechted the olah, and we had a half a minute to think only that karban chatat, meaning only the karban chatat that we're mentioning, which is the Sa'ir of the Nasi, needs to be shechted in the north, right? We said that's wrong, that in fact every karban chatat has to be shechted in the north. So then what does the pasuk of oto tell you when we talk about a Sa'ir Nasi, right? Says the Gemara, you're right. That pasuk is extra, but mibayle lekiditanya, we need it for the following Braita. Braita says, Odo b'tzafon, that you bring a karban sa'ir nasi b'tzafon, and the reason we say it is because there's one karban chatat that you don't shecht in the north. And what's that karban? Ein sa'ir nachshon b'tzafon. You recall there's a whole separate category of karbanot called a sa'ir nachshon. That was the karban that was brought as the nisi'im. Right? Nachshon ben Aminadav was the first of the nisi'im, but there were, of course, 11 others who followed him. Each one of them, on the day that they were in the miluim, they would bring a karban. That's not a regular chatat because they weren't doing it for a sin, right? They were doing it to be mekadesh the Mishkan. They didn't have to shech that in the north. And so Torah says, shech the sa'ir of the nasi in the north. Now, it's not telling me only sa'ir nasi. It's every karban chatat except for a chatat nachshon, meaning a chatat that was done just to dedicate the Mishkan. Tanya, and in fact, there's a Braita which supports this, which the Braita says, it says by the karban chatat. This is the karban chatat of the nasi. The samach yado al rosh ha'sa'ir. There's an extra vav, we think, and lean your hands on the head of the sa'ir. That's telling me the rabot sa'ir nachshon l'smicha. It's telling you that in fact you have to also do smicha, leaning your hands on the animal on the sa'ir nachshon, meaning the special karbanot that were done for the nesiim. Even Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Shimon says, no, it's telling you the Rabot Sirei Avodah Zarah Smicha. And there's another Sa'ir, which we're going to actually talk about a lot more soon, called Sa'ir Avodah Zarah, Sa'ir that's brought by the community who do Avodah Zarah unwittingly. There, the Torah never mentions that they lean on it. But the fact is, says Rabbi Shimon, that the extra Vav tells you that they have to lean on it in that case as well. Because now, I would have thought, according to Rabbi Yehuda, the Tanakama, that since the pasuk came and said that although a sa'ir nachshon is a special kind of sa'ir that's done just to dedicate to Beit HaMikdash, and it's not really a karban chatat like regular karbanot, but the Torah said also lean on top of it, so it's already saying it has some principles that are similar to a regular karban chatat. You might think it's Rabbi Namin Tzafon, that you should apply more principles, and you should also have to shecht it in the north, and that's why the Torah says v'shachat oto. Tell you that only it, meaning only regular chatot and not chatot nachshon, kamash malan. So that is the proof. That is why the pasuk comes and says ota to tell you only a chatat that's done for sins, basically, but not a chatat that's done for dedication. Atzkefa Ravina got very angry with this explanation. That you just basically explained it according to one Tana and a Braita. So Hanichal Rabbi Yehuda, who said that a sa'ir nachshon has smicha. Now, you might have thought, just like it has smicha, it might need to be shechted in the north. But the Rabbi Shimon, Michael Amim, Rabbi Shimon never said you have to have smicha. So basically, according to Rabbi Shimon, now the pasuk is meaningless. Marlecha Marzutra Beider of Tavi, the Ravina said, Marzutra Beider of Tavi, Ravina, chill out, calm down, because it's not any better according to Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda menicha. Why is it a good answer for Rabbi Yehuda? Rabbi Yehuda, we said, because the Sa'ir Nachshon is added to do smicha, you would have thought you added for shechting in the north, and therefore you need a pasuk to say you don't. Why in the world would you have thought that? Why wouldn't you have read it and said, L'maydi itrabi, l'maydi lo itrabi? Torah said a halacha and added a principle that a Sa'ir Nachshon has to have smicha. Why in the world would you run with that, and say it also needs to be shechted in the north? It's not connected in any way. So it's not a good answer according to anybody. The chitema, no, says well, maybe it is a good answer because ilo miate kra, if the Torah had it specifically excluded animal from having to be shechted in the north, and we're calling that animal the Sa'ir Nachshon, havi amina teiti b'binyanav. I might have thought that why don't we learn it out from a binyanav? Binyanav means where you have a father or an archetype that teaches about everything. So since the archetypical chatat has to be done in the north, every chatat is done in the north. Why would you would have thought that? Well, if you had thought that in Cain, smicha gufa nami tetimi binyanav, then you should say the same thing for smicha. Every karban chatat needs to have an owner lean on top of it, or beit din. So the chatat nashon should also have someone lean on top of it. Ella, why didn't you say that? Because migdorot lo gamrinan. Right? Clearly, there's a difference between a karban chatat that is a chatat done l'sha'ah, meaning it's done for one time for the dedication of the Beit HaMikdash, and one that's a general principle that's done for all generations, for every time a person sins. And we don't compare one to the other specifically. So you shouldn't have any reason to think that the karban chatat nachshon right? The Sa'ir Nachshon has to be shechted in the north. It's not similar to a Karban Chatat in any way. It's its own thing. And so we're back to our problem that we had a few lines ago, which is, what is the Torah excluding from being shechted in the north? We tried to say it's excluding the Sa'ir Nachshon. So you don't need a pasuk for that. There's no reason to include the Sa'ir Nachshon. So Ella Oto b'tzafon, what is Oto telling you? That it, meaning it, the animal has to be done b'tzafon, ve'ein shochit b'tzafon. What it's telling you, that the person doing the shechita does not need to be in the tzafon, right? What does that mean? Shochit says, why do you need a pasuk? Meaning that you could be, that the animal has to be shechted in the north. Remember, we learned earlier that you have to accept the blood in the north, but the person doing the shechita can actually be standing outside of the north, even in the south, or outside the Beit HaMikdash potentially, as we talked about before. There's Gemara 1 second, but that we have another source for that. Because shochit, I'm just finding the place again, breath. So again, just to review while I find the place, we are 7 lines from the last of the narrow lines, I believe, right? No, 10 lines from the last of the narrow line. Says the Gemara, the shochit b'tzafon, right, is how. So what we're saying is that oto b'tzafon, the animal has to be shechted in the north, but the person doing the slaughtering ain't shochit b'tzafon. Ask the Gemara, that's true. That halacha happens to be correct, but we have another source for that. Shochit mid Rabbi Achia nafka. We learn that from the Breita of Rabbi Achia. The Tanya Rabbi Achia Omer. This is a Breita. Rabbi Achia is a Tana. Right? Rabbi Achia said, the pasuk says, way back in the beginning of Vayikra, v'shachat oto al yerech hamizbeach tzafon. Shechted on the side of the mizbeach on the north. Right? Ma tamul lomar. What are we learning from the word oto, is really what he's darshaning. Right? You're doing an animal shecht on the north. Why does it shecht it? Telling you, says Rabbi Achia, right? We already learned this, but Rabbi Achia knew this, that you have to stand in the north and accept the blood in the north. V'im amad b'darom, if you're standing in the south of the Azara, the kibel b'tzafon, and you stick your hand out and you put the cup into the north, pasul. That is pasul, right? We learned that earlier today, right? Now, you might think the same thing is true by shechita. Yachalav zakein, that the same thing is true by shechita. If you're standing in the south and you put out the knife and you shecht it in the north, that would be pasul. Therefore, Talmud oto. Therefore, the Torah says, v'shachat oto. Oto b'tzafon, ve'ena shochit b'tzafon. Only the animal needs to be in the north, not the person doing the shechita. So again, we're back to our original question. There's an extra word, oto b'tzafon, by the sa'ir of the avodah, a sa'ir of the nasi. What is that excluding? That is where finally it's not saying that you can't have the shochet in the tzafon. You don't need to have the shochet in the tzafon, because we learned that from another pasuk. Ella oto b'tzafon ve'ein ben of b'tzafon. This is the halacha telling you that a karban ola, a karban chatas of an animal has to be done in the north. But a bird, even if it's kachay kadashim, does not have to be shechted in the north. The Tanya, and that's based on a Breita. The Breita supports that. The Breita says, Yachol yehed ben of ta'in tzafon. You might have thought you got to shech the bird also in the north. Why would you have thought you have to shech the bird also in the north? Because, did you? It seems like a kal v'chomer. Uma ben tzon, think about it. An animal that's a tzon, right, a sheep, she'elo kavalo kohen. Right, you don't actually have to have a kohen shechting it. Remember, a animal chatat can be shechted by Yisrael, right? But still kavalo tzafon. But the Torah says, sorry, ola ben tzon, the shelo kavalo kohen, kavalo tzafon. But you have to do it in the north. Ben Of, when you start talking about a bird, kavalo kohen. Remember, only the kohen can do malika on the bird. No Yisrael is allowed to kill the bird and cut off the head. Eno din shit balo tzafon. Shouldn't it be a kal v'chomer that you need to have a kohen do the shechita or taking off the head? You for sure need to do it in the north. Amalomer oto. Says oto, right? Therefore, it says oto to tell you that only an animal needs to be shechted in the north. Birds do not need to be shechted in the north. Well, that's not a good kal v'chomer at all, because mala ben tzon can kavalo kli. Right? There's a huge difference between a bird and an animal. Remember that Animal, you have to accept the blood in a kli. Remember, with the kohen and the bird, right? They basically, you just, kli, not accept the blood in a kli. You have to use a kli to kill the animal. Right? You can't shecht an animal with your fingers, obviously, even if they're very sharp. You have to use a knife. And so it could very well be that even though, it's certainly, there are areas in which a bird is more chamor than an animal. There's areas in which an animal has more requirements than a bird. For example, an animal needs a knife. A bird doesn't need a knife. And the point is that you can't then make a kal v'chomer and say everything that applies to an animal has to apply to a bird. Clearly, there are things that apply to animals that don't apply to birds, like a knife. So that gets rid of your kal v'chomer. Ella, says Gemara, okay, another explanation. You know what Oto b'tzafon tells me? Oto b'tzafon ve'ein pesach b'tzafon. What's telling you at, I think, the last of the narrow lines is that Oto, a carbon chatat, and also it's true by an Ola and an Asham, they have to be shechted in the north of the Azara, but a carbon Pesach does not have to be shechted in the north of the Azara. Okay? Says the Tanya. In fact, there's a brayta that says why you would have thought this. Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov Omer, Yahu Yehi Pesach Toun Safon. You might have thought that carbon Pesach needs to be shechted in the north. Why would you have thought that? Torah never says that. Because dinu, it would be a kal v'chomer. Ma ola, think about it. In ola, shkein lo kavalo zman l'shchitato. Right? In ola, there's no fixed time to shecht it. You can bring an ola whenever you feel like it. You did something, you want to bring a gift, you can bring it on Monday, on Tuesday, morning, afternoon, but kavalo tzafon. So although the time is not fixed, the location is fixed. So Pesach, so now you get to a carbon Pesach. Shekavalo zman l'shchitato, we fix the time. You have to shecht it on Erev Pesach in the morning, right? Or Bein Arbaim, actually. Don't you say, okay, there's an additional requirement that it has to be done in this place? Amalomar Oto. Therefore, the Torah says it is done in the north, but not a carbon Pesach in the north. That's, again, really far-fetched, because Malo Ola Shekin Kalil, right? You can't say that everything that applies to an Ola should apply to a Pesach, because a Pesach is much stricter than an Ola, because it has to be done at a certain time. It's true. Pesach is stricter in one way, but Ola is stricter in many ways, including the fact that it's burned completely on the Mizbeach. So you can't learn out. You would have never thought out to learn a carbon Pesach from an Ola. Okay, well, what about learning a Pesach from a carbon Chatat? And Chatat doesn't have a fixed time, most Chatat, and you have to do it in the north. So maybe I'd learn Pesach from there. Well, that's not a good proof either. Right, a chatat does great things. It's mechaper and a chi of kritot. Pesach can't do that for you. So you can't tell me that Pesach is always more requirements than a chatat, right? There's areas of a chatat that don't go to a Pesach. Meaning, again, this is all to show that you can't compare one to the other. Okay, so learn about me Asham. What about comparing it to an Asham? Again, an Asham is a carbon kache kachim. Has to be done in the north. We'll learn out later how we know that. But an Asham has to be done we actually did it last week too, but an Asham has to be done in the north. And it has no fixed time. So maybe a carbon Pesach, which has a fixed time, should also be done in the north. Again, Mala Asham Shkin Kache Kachim. The difference in Asham is holier. It's done with more restrictions, eaten by limited people, different rules about Kache Kachim. And Mikula Nam, you can't combine them all together. Shekain Kache Kachim, they're all Kache Kachim. So rule out Pesach. La'olam says the Gemara Kadamra Meikara. I'm going to go back to the first halacha, right? Not first, but the earlier one. We said Oto b'tzafon tells you ein shochet b'tzafon, that you have to shecht an animal in the north, but the person doing shechita doesn't have to be in the north. The Dekashilach, now you asked a question on that earlier and said we know that from Rabbi Achya. Rabbi Achya nafkalan lav lamute shochet b'tzafon. What Rabbi Achya is telling you is not Rabbi Achya's halacha is telling you not that a person is allowed to shecht it not in the north. We need this pasuk to tell you that. His halacha is telling you, his halacha is telling you that in a case where the shochet is not in the north, but the mikabel is in the north, it's kosher. Meaning, when Rabbi Achia, all you can prove is not that the person who's shechting it does not need to be in the north, but that the person accepting it has to be standing in the north. We said earlier that we already know that. Mikabel, we learned out earlier in today's daf, mi lakach, and we dash in the word lakach to tell you lo kach, right? He has to take it, nafka. He didn't learn it that way. Lakach, mi lakach, lo mashmalei. Rabbi Achia did not agree with that drasha. So in fact, Rabbi Achia's drasha is not to tell me that the person shechting the animal does not have to be in the north. It's to tell me that the person accepting the blood has to be in the north. How do I know the person shechting the animal doesn't have to be in the north? That's from the pasuk of Oto, that the animal needs to be in the north for shechita, but not the person doing shechita. Okay, so that's where we are. Let's do a few more lines, because I know it's late, especially in Portugal, but we're going to get there. Says the Gemara now, one more halacha. Where am I? 5 lines, I think, 6 lines from the bottom. Says the Gemara, okay, what we found so far is Ashkechan shchita ba'ola lemitzvah, right? We found that shchita by an ola has to be done, and ideally. We also discovered that Kabbalah Nami lemitzvah ashkechan. We also discovered that you have to accept the blood in the north, that you're supposed to do it. But how do you know that it's me'akev? Shchita v'kabbalah la'akev minalan by an ola. Remember, we said earlier today that a korban chatas was repeated to tell you that by a chatas you have to do it in the north, and it's ma'akev. But by an ola, it only said it one time, right? So by an ola, it said one time, which tells you it's a mitzvah to do it. How do you know that by an ola, if you don't do it, it's puzzle? Says Rav Ada bar Ava v'tema Rav bar Shela, that's ridiculous. Mikal v'chomer. I learned that from Mikal v'chomer. Because ma chatat, think about it. The only way we know that a korban chatat has to be done in the north, right, is because we learned it from an ola. It never says it by a chatat. It just says do it where you do the ola. So ma chatat haba'a mikoach ola me'akevet, a chatat, which is the only way you know you do it in the north is because you do a korban ola in the north, and the Torah says it's ma'akev. Ola sheba chatat mikocho inadin shma'akevet. So for sure in ola, which is the original source of it, it has to be ma'akev. Well, that's a good answer, but malachatat shchim mechapet l'chayvei kritut. But a chatat is a much more powerful korban than an ola, because a chatat gets you a kapar for a chi of karet. Remember, an ola is brought for stam, for mitzvah taseh maybe, or for just being generous. But a chatat has a huge function. So maybe a korban chatat is essential to do it in the north, and it's ma'akev, and maybe it's not true by an ola. Says Ravina, you missed the whole point. Amar Ravina, and I will tell you we're going to talk about this tomorrow too. Hakashli Rav Ada bar Ava, the question Rav Ada bar Ava asked was a conceptual question. Klum matzino tafel chamor min ha'ikar. Where do you ever find a case where a secondary thing is stricter than the primary thing? Meaning, in this case, the Torah says shech the ola in the north. We then derive shech the chatas in the north because you shech the ola in the north. The Torah then says by chatas that it's ma'akev. I understand the chatas is very strict. It's more stricter than the ola. It's much more chamor maybe. But it's not the ikar. It's the tafel. It's the secondary thing. The ikar is the ola. So how could you ever have a case where you have one source called the ikar, you learn out a second thing from that first source, and then the second thing has more halachot than the original thing? So that was the question that he asked, and that is where we're going to stop today. But that's the conceptual idea, which is that if you learn out a secondary thing from a primary thing, how could the secondary thing then have rules that are stricter than the primary thing? And that was his question. Now, tomorrow's daf, which I recorded ahead of time and started from this point, is going to bring several examples where such a thing might actually be the case, where you have a primary thing with certain limited halachot, you have a derivative of that thing, which ends up being stricter than the primary. So I encourage everyone to join tomorrow for the daf, which I pre-recorded because I'm going to be traveling in the airplane tomorrow at this time. And it is available. I put the link on the WhatsApp. So hopefully everyone can look at the WhatsApp.
They said she said yesterday that she couldn't put any links on it. YouTube wasn't allowing it until the very end of the day.
So I already posted it. So I looked at it this afternoon. I was able to find it. So if you go to the WhatsApp now and you click on that link, you can see already tomorrow's daf. But I would wait till tomorrow maybe. So
you did it this afternoon?
Get ahead of it.
What did you say, this afternoon?
I checked like 2 hours ago. I put it up. I'm in a different country, so Shabbat was over for me. Yeah.
Okay. Well, so you put it in yourself?
No, I went. Yeah, I put it in myself. I went to YouTube. I found it on YouTube. I copied the link and put it in the WhatsApp. If you go to the buy it YouTube, it's already there. I copied the link into the WhatsApp. That's how I found it.
I checked the buy it YouTubes, and she said she couldn't get anything else in there. In fact, yesterday's daf was recorded, and that didn't show up until like 4:30 in the afternoon.
Right. I don't know, but I recorded this on Wednesday, so maybe it was earlier. But either way, it's there now. Okay, Shavua Tov, everyone. Have a good night. And God willing, I'll
I have a
see you
quick
again
question.
next month. Yes, James.
Why were we talking about the Seir Nesi'im as a chatat?
So the Seir Nasi is a chatat. Remember, the Seir Nasi is a special Seir that's brought by a Nasi. The pasuk says, "Im Nasi yachata," the Nasi sins. So if you recall, we have what are called civilian chataot, is what I call them, right? People like you and me, if we do a sin by mistake, we bring a karban chatat. But there are special chataot that are brought for the Seir Nasi. If the president or whatever, the king, sins, he brings a special karban. If the Kohen Gadol sins, he brings a special karban. And if the tzibur sin, they bring a special karban.
Right, so I guess my question was about the Seir Nachshon. I thought that was the same thing as the Seir Nesi'i.
No. So it's not. So the Seir Nachshon is very different. It's right. So we brought it because in some ways it's similar because right, it's the Nesi'im bringing a Seir, but the Seir Nachshon was the one-time Seir that was done on the day of Miluim. That's talked about.
No, I understand why it is, but besides it being the same animal, why would we consider it being a chatat?
So the Torah describes it as a chatat, as bringing a karban chatat for their karban, but it's obviously not it's not a chatat for a sin, it's a chatat for dedication.
But it's called a chatat in the mikra.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Is this this program record in the if you said you couldn't get into the buy it website, so will this program be recorded? Because some things are very difficult to follow.
Yeah, so this will be recorded because I did the VPN. And feel free to reach out to me anytime.
You did
questions.
what? What do you call that? What did you do, you said?
I went through a virtual network, which a VPN through my work.
So then you send it to buy it from there?
No, the thing we're on right now is the buy it Zoom page. So it should be recorded automatically.
Oh, it is the buy it Zoom page.
Okay.
Kenny, it seems like you're confusing two different things. There's the YouTube page where these recordings are stored, and there's the Zoom where we are now live. There's the Byte Zoom is where we are right now.
Oh, all right. So
this recording
I'm gonna log
is going to be saved and then uploaded later to the YouTube page. Thank you very much, Ellie.
So it's recorded. It's on the Byte Zoom. What do you say?
No. Right now it's just on Zoom. So it's recorded to someone's computer. Someone then has to manually take that recording and upload it to YouTube. So that can take a couple of days. So because he did on Wednesday, the daf for Sunday, it's already up there.
Oh, so this one takes a few days.
This one we should wait till Wednesday, Thursday should be up there.
So this is not on the Buy It Zoom page yet.
The Byte YouTube
not the YouTube page.
Exactly. That takes some manual effort. It's not automatic.
Oh, I see. I didn't realize they had it. When I look on YouTube and click and buy it, I don't get anything. It just is. Well, how do you type that in to get for other things, not only for this? You just type in buy it /YouTube or YouTube /buy it.
Kenny, are you in the WhatsApp group?
Yeah, I'm in the WhatsApp group, but I'm asking about something in.
No, I understand. So if you go to the WhatsApp group, open it up right now. I'll do it with you. In fact, I can share my screen. Are you able to see? Are you able to see my screen?
How would I do that?
Maybe. Just only the host can share. Anyway, open up WhatsApp. Open up HIR Daf Yomi, and you'll see Eliezer Oberstein has posted Sunday, November 2nd, Zevachim Daf 49.
Oh, I do see that, but the other one didn't. It took a while till they got.
All right, so it's already there.
It wasn't there yesterday.
That may be. That may be.
Because I logged into yesterday's daf yesterday. She couldn't upload that until afternoon. She says YouTube will not let us download anymore until later this afternoon before Shabbat.
Right. So I guess sometime in the afternoon she tried again and she did it.
Right. I don't know exactly what that means. They will not let us download anymore. I don't know that's a technology issue. I don't know what that means.
Yep. Some technology issue.
That maybe they have a contract and they can only load so much. I don't know I don't know. I would, but I was asking a more
We can only guess on what that means.
So, okay, so I'm asking a more general question. If there are people have told me there is um a buy it YouTube page and one can access lectures, shirim, whatever it may be. So how does one
Yes.
find that page?
So click on the link that Ellie sent, and it'll take you to the
No,
Byte page,
that's for this particular shiur. But I'm talking
which is located. So click on the shear, open up YouTube, and it'll say the host of that video is the Byte. Then you can click on the Byte, and you can see all the YouTubes for the DAF.
so if I not okay, so if I click on that, which I did now. So I've done that. So it says
So underneath that video, right, it'll say Sunday, November 2nd, 2025, Zevachim, and then
right.
it'll say the Byte Daf Yomi. Click on the Byte Daf Yomi,
Okay.
and it'll take you to the general page where all the videos are located. I see Fridays.
Okay. It goes back to September. Okay. Well, maybe
Yeah,
maybe more. Maybe actually more. Oh, well, maybe.
yeah. Well, there's probably several years worth of
Oh,
DAF here.
well, I can see back to around September, maybe.
I'm scrolling. I got July,
Yeah,
June,
I'm stuck at
May,
I think this is
April.
I don't know where you find those. I got September the 20. Oh wait, I do
Well,
see some July. It's just not no
if you're
July.
on if you're on home, go to video and it'll have them in order.
Oh, I go to video.
Yeah, video has all the videos in order.
Oh, I see that. So now, what about other things besides Daf Yomi? Other
Right.
shiurim that are supposedly on the YouTube.
That's a good question. If you just go to YouTube General and type in the Byte,
Type YouTube General.
I mean, no, in the YouTube main page, there's a search function. Just type
Right.
in THEBAYIT, the Byte.
Type in the search page. Okay. The buy it.
Right, right.
Uh, well, let's see what I get here. I mean, I do get there are some programs, but not every program. So, for instance, there's a program at the Bayit Vagan Street in Jerusalem. And then
No,
there's
no, no.
no, I know there are the Bayit June 20, a Yaakov Bobot message to the Bayit. There's welcome to the Bayit Slichot concert. Yes, there are some, but there are other things mixed in here.
Right. So the Byte Slichot concert, yes, hit that, and then click on the Byte logo underneath, just like we did before.
Okay,
The
I'll
host
click
of that page.
the Slichot concert. Then
That's swinging faster after the age of
okay,
55.
stop this. So you get it.
Actually,
So then you say the logo. Oh, there's the logo. Okay.
So again, you can go to that. So you're on that home page. Or they're called channels. So the Byte has a channel posting all their videos.
So the logo, you said it takes me to all the videos?
Yeah, just like before, just like we're on the DAF page with all the videos for the DAF.
There's a logo at the bottom. You're right, but
So click on the logo, the Byte.
something happened here. Now how do I get this? It's too large. 1 second. Oh my God, it just expanded. It's so large. How do I decrease it? The size, it's a whole page.
Hmm.
What do I do here?
Hard to say without seeing what's going on.
I understand that, but now the page just expanded.
Oh,
Now, how do I get?
what if you click escape?
Okay, well, it didn't work. The escape didn't work. So anyway, the logo, oh, that expands and that gives me a full screen. That's what it happens when I click on the logo. Actually, the logo doesn't do anything. On the sidebars, there are plenty of things on the sidebars, but this is,
The sidebars are just suggested videos based on what you've already watched.
oh yeah,
Yes, you can ignore the sidebar, but what we go back to the search function at the top and type in the byte.
I did that. Yeah. So,
Right, so one of the
okay,
bytes slichot,
so here's a logo. One of them is a logo.
right? Has the byte logo that we're familiar with, the little house, right?
That's right.
That should take you to the byte YouTube channel where all the videos are hosted.
Well, there aren't that many. There are, well, I don't know. Get rid of this thing. There are, okay, maybe videos. Quick video. I click the button video. And there
And
are,
the first one should be Rev. Stephen's Ezekiel class, chapter 12 from 3 days ago.
that's the first one.
Yep, we're on the same page. Learning Torah with Trope, Rav Avi's message from Yom Tif. But again, this goes back several months, if not years. I see January, 5 months ago. Clergy Shabbat message from 6 months ago. Yom HaShoah Seder, where I'm on there from 6 months ago.
Oh, the Seder, I don't know.
Yeah, so almost every class has been recorded.
12. June. Okay, I do see many things. Maybe not everything, but it should be in order.
Yep, if you're on videos, it'll be in order. So I'm scrolling down, I see stuff from 2 years ago. Yeah.
Looking at playlist. Videos. Well, I found many things.
Okay.
Well, that's latest, oldest home videos.
I gotta jump
Okay.
off, Kenny. I'll talk to you soon.
Okay, thank you. Okay, bye now.
Bye-bye.
I don't know how he's still on. I don't know how we're still on this together, but I don't know how that works either.